All right, great. Well, welcome everybody. Welcome to the flow of power using dispositor trees to visualize relationships between planets. My website is translationoflight.org. Please check it out. I do readings. And this is actually an updated version of a talk I gave about a year and a half ago in person. It was our first talk post-COVID, which was great, and it was a workshop. And I've been to so many astrology lectures that I get a little bit bored of the kind of one-way broadcast thing. And I generally want to walk away from any lecture with something that I can practically use in my own practice. Hopefully, you'll learn something here. Either you haven't heard about this technique, or maybe there's some nuances maybe you hadn't considered. So anyway, here's a cool little Renaissance engraving showing our planets, and it's a tree. It's not really a dispositor tree, but it's cool. I made this. I colored it. I wasn't alive in the 1600s. So some considerations to start off with. I just had some coffee, so I'm a little bit I'm kind of raving here. You can use traditional or modern planetary rulerships. It doesn't matter. I use traditional rulers in case, this is pretty basic stuff you guys are all aware of. But if you want to do a tree with modern rulers, please go ahead and see what you can learn there. The whole point is here, hopefully you have a piece of paper and a pen. We're going to go through an exercise where we step by step do this together. And there's definitely some nuances, and there's like 6 or 7 different types of dispositor trees, which some people have proposed some kind of working explanations for how they might, what they might signify in a personality or in an event. So what is a dispositor? So in astrology, we have so much outdated language that's coming from centuries, multiple mistranslations and language confusion. Dispositor sounds like something in a medical office. It's not. It just means a planet that has a planet in one of its signs in a chart, meaning the sun in Leo, and there's no other planets in Leo. It's not dispositing anything. It's sort of like a homeowner that has no tenants, right? Can be in Leo, the sun can be somewhere else, but there's nothing no other planets are there, so it's not dispositing. But a dispositor would be like, let's say you have the sun in Aquarius, but you've got Mercury in Leo. Now the sun is dispositing. I hope that makes sense, but I'll have a lot of graphics to share. So Astro.com says each sign of the zodiac is ruled by a planet. We know this. So when planet A is in a sign that's ruled by planet B, then B is the dispositor of A. So if Venus is in Cancer, the moon is its dispositor. And so this is sort of like the hidden org chart of who's running the show. And it's not always as obvious, even if you know your essential dignities, it's not always as obvious looking at a chart that perhaps Mercury is ruling every other planet in the chart, or no other planets in the chart. So the earliest examples I could find on this were this German astrologer Thomas Ring, and here's some diagrams that he drew over here using some of the European glyphs for Kafka, Goethe, and Schumann. And we're going to go into this. It might look a little bit crazy, a little mathy, but it's not that hard. So this is an important distinction I want to make. I was mentioning this. Domicile is a planet that is in a sign that it rules. We know that. Sun in Leo, Venus in Taurus. That's not the same thing as a dispositor. Okay? So I made this little logic tree, or this little truth table here. So a planet in domicile is like a homeowner that's in residence. So when the moon is in Cancer, she owns the house. She's living there. Does she have tenants? Maybe Mercury's in Cancer. Great. That's her border, and she's dispositing Mercury, right? In some way, she's responsible for Mercury. She could just as easily have no planets in her sign, and then there's no dispositorship. The homeowner can also live somewhere else. So let's say the moon is in Gemini, doesn't have domicile dignity, but Mercury could be there. No, so now she doesn't have that power, but she still owns Cancer. She's always going to own Cancer. Jupiter's always going to own Sagittarius. I'm sorry for the capitalist real estate metaphor, but that was the best thing I could come up with. Um, so let's move on a little bit here. So 6 types. There's actually quite a few different types of trees. So I know this is a little bit small to read, but I did email you guys and I shared a whole PDF that I created that's a step-by-step workbook that you can also, at your own leisure, try out. But let me walk through some of these. And so the first one that we're going to start out with is maybe the simplest one. It's called like the final dispositor, sort of like the main boss in the video game. This is one planet that is disposing all of the other planets in the chart. So the energies around this, again, let's use the same symbolism and metaphors that we use for everything else in astrology. Cohesion, right? It's a focused chart. It has one manager that's running the whole thing. There's no, confusion. It's just here's the one planet that's ruling these. So the power type that has been proposed is hierarchical, presidential, dictatorial. And we're going to look at Beyoncé's chart. She's an example of this. So again, here I'm using the term in residence. That's what I mean by domicile. So this means she has Venus in Libra. So Venus is in domicile in Libra, and every other planet in the chain in the chart is reporting back to that Venus. For example, we won't look at his tree here, but Paul McCartney has Mercury as the final dispositor. And if you ever read anything about the Beatles, and John Lennon has a very messy, a different type of tree where there's nobody in charge. There's multiple planets that have to get along with each other. And if you read about the Beatles, John Lennon would be at home doing drugs and stuff and hanging out, and Paul McCartney would be up early in the morning and say, "Hey guys, we have to go to the studio now. I have this. You show up here. You play this part. I do." So there is something of that energy there. So another type is mutual reception. So this is when you've got that kind of what would you call that? Like home sharing kind of a situation where two planets are in each other's domicile. So let's say Mars is in Libra and Venus is in Aries, right? That's not a great situation because they're in mutual detriment, but they're kind of two teams that are working together. Some people have proposed this as maybe it indicates two distinct sides of a personality where one side might dominate. One planet might have, five planets that it's dispositing, the other one might have four or three or something like that. So we're going to look at examples of all of these. Some of the powers described here are like sharing, debate, mutual respect, but also the potential for imbalance. And Muhammad Ali is an example of that. And so going back to the landlord metaphor, neither of these planets have domicile power, but they each have tenants. They each have planets in their signs. Okay. Committee. John Lennon has this type. Three or more planets. This is called a chain, basically, a dispositor chain. And this is the most confusing one that will take you a little time to practice with. And I myself have to sit here and draw them sometimes more than once because it's not always clear what is the right order. So just in the same way that it's a little hard to draw these trees, this can indicate confusion, a lack of focus, varied interests, flexible motivation. Power type, maybe it's more democratic. It's literally more like there's no way for the chart to function unless Venus is in charge of Jupiter and Jupiter's in charge of Mercury and they have to work together. So again, you can see the red X here. Nobody's in domicile, but they have tenants. Okay. Ruling planet is another one. There's one or more planets in domicile or rulership. Obama has this. He has two planets that are in domicile, and I think both of them also have tenants and disposit other planets. There's a nuance here. The single ruler, there's one planet in domicile, but it has no tenants. So for instance, think of the moon in Cancer in a chart, and there's nothing else in Cancer. So it's dignified, but it's kind of a loner. Aretha Franklin's moon is in that state. So you can see here the green check mark, she has domicile, but no tenants. So don't worry about too much of the details here. I know I'm throwing a lot at you. It'll make more sense. We're going to go through each one individually. Very common is this mixed type, and I don't have percentages of how often these occur, unfortunately, but there's some mixture of the above. And you'll see Aretha Franklin has this, Carl Jung has an example of this where there's a couple of mutual receptions and there's no final dispositor, but there's a ruling planet, say. All right, I hope that makes sense so far. So let's look at some examples here. This will become clear. So final dispositor. Here we go, the legendary Beyoncé. So you can see What I mean by a dispositor tree is literally this thing that I've drawn here on the right. So this is one planet in domicile, Venus in Libra, and it disposits all the other planets. So what I mean by disposit is not just the first generation where Venus is in charge of Pluto and all of the other, points that are in Libra, but all of the points in Libra, also they roll up to the Venus, if that makes sense. So the Jupiter that's in Libra is dispositing the Neptune, and the Mercury in Libra is dispositing the Sun and Mars and the Moon and Uranus and the MC. So we talked about this. She's literally called the Queen. So she's got this dignified one ruler. Like we didn't say king and queen. She's the queen. She's born on Friday, which is Venus's day. She has different lyrics about being an independent woman. Not, look at where the Mars is pretty far down on that in this chart here. You can also look at the elements too, and I like to try to get an idea of this. There's a general idea that the planets towards the top of the chart are, by metaphor, a little more angular or a little more visible, and the ones that are several levels down are maybe harder to access. Maybe they're more cadent, if you use that metaphor. So, for instance, this is a person that, has a very strong air. Level one is air, level two is air. Level three, we get into some fire and some earth. And then finally, water is all the way at the bottom. So again, I invite you to, if you find this useful or interesting, to try to work with this and extend this and see what you can discover, because I think there's a lot to be discovered here. So mutual reception. So we talked about this. Again, it's probably easier with the visuals. I should also mention I had done this presentation with an astrologer who also did a lot of tarot, and she proposed a bunch of metaphors, sort of cards for each of these things. And for the mutual reception, she tried to come up with the Two of Cups as a thing. I think that I sort of I'm downplaying that now because I think that might add another layer that's unnecessarily complicated here. But we were just looking for other ways to explain what the energy would be like for these different settings. So let's look briefly here at his tree. So he's got his top level of his tree, the mode is fixed. There's a lot of fixity there. And he's got Venus and Saturn working together. So Venus is living at Saturn's house and Saturn's they're doing a timeshare in Miami or something. Um, so he's got this, let's say, desire for equality. These are just very thumbnail quick delineations. Venus and Aquarius, and Saturn and Taurus. That's like the most solid, stubborn, determined Saturn you could possibly ever imagine, right? So, he if you look, he's got Mars in detriment and he's got Jupiter in detriment. So if you know anything about Ali, he was very famous for two things beyond his incredible athletic skill. One was not refusing to fight in the Vietnam War, Mars in detriment, and also becoming Muslim, Jupiter in detriment, religion. So again, I think you could, as you practice, you could see these things over time. You could learn to note these things down in other ways. I'm not saying it's the only way to see this, but there's something about this that I just love to see the diagram. And it's like, oh, look, that just pops out really clear. Both of those planets, I mentioned like the height of where they are on the tree. Both of those planets are at the bottom of those branches too. So they're kind of like maybe problematic, say. Okay, so let's go here. Committee tree. So this is the John Lennon. My co-author had talked about Three of Pentacles. So again, none of these planets are in domicile. So if we use domicile, if we define that as a planet having the ability to take care of the topics of the houses that they rule and the planets they disposit, that's kind of missing. He also, in terms of modes, remember Ali had just the top level was all fixed, right? Determined. That guy was hardcore. Look at, Lennon has got mutable and fixed and cardinal, all trying to work together at the same time. And what I should explain, these little arrows mean the Mars is in Libra. So it disposits Mercury, which is in Scorpio, which is Mars's sign. The Mercury is in Scorpio. The Mercury is dispositing the Venus, which is in Virgo, his sign. And the Venus, we go back and make this loop. Venus is dispositing the Mars. So again, there's people who have proposed almost a conversational style. I don't know where you would start this necessarily, but you would say, Mars in Libra, maybe that's some passive aggressive energy or something like that, something about aggression in relationships. That's driving the mind and the thought, which is scorpionic, right? Maybe intense. And that Mercury is dispositing the Venus, and the Venus in turn is dispositing the Mars. So you can see here, he has something interesting here. Saturn is dispositing the moon. And I was looking up some things about Lennon, and even when he was a kid, people said he had this deep interest in death. He was afraid of cremation, deformities, sickly people, and warts. Also, famously, his mother died when he was a kid, and that really hurt him a lot. So we're going to see another person later on in the presentation that also has this Saturn kind of beating up on the moon, bullying the moon, so to speak. Um, so interestingly, his 11th house is in Aquarius. And, well, if we say 11th house is groups, his first group that he formed was called the Quarrymen. And Aquarius, according to Lilly, one of its rulerships is quarries. So interesting. Um, Single ruler. So this is what I was talking about. This is a planet that has dignity by domicile. So you can see the moon here in the upper right. It's in Cancer. Um, it's not really, it doesn't have any responsibilities to any other planets. It's just off by itself. Okay. She also has all the modes up here, and she has not only that, but she has two of these mutual reception things, like we had seen with Ali. So Mercury and Jupiter are switching places, switching signs, and Saturn and Venus are also switching signs. However, the Mercury and the Jupiter are in mutual detriment. So Mercury is not doing great in Pisces, and Jupiter's not doing great in Gemini. Um, so moon, if we take the moon, the mundane, delineation, this is the people, this is popularity. There's kind of a respect and a dignity to Aretha Franklin. In fact, one of her famous songs was Respect. This moon is in the eighth house, and her mother died young. Her father, if we take Saturn to be her father in Taurus, it's in mutual reception with this Venus in Aquarius, and he had lots of affairs that was destabilizing to the family. And finally, Mercury is dispositing the most planets. If you see Mercury here, it's got 1, 2, 3, 4 planets it's in charge of. It's got the most responsibility in the chart. And one of her other songs was called Think. So, interesting. Ruling planets. So here's former President Obama. So you can see here he's got Sun in Leo, so it's got the domicile and it's running most of the chart for him. So it's Mercury, the Moon, Pluto, Mars, and so on. But the Saturn is only in charge of Jupiter over here. I hope that's clear. So again, just as a proposal, a provocation, does the man have some kind of a split between his ego, Sun in Leo, and his persona, right? Because he's got an Aquarius rising, I believe. He has a quote, "Let failure teach you." And that's the funny thing with using this technique. Every time I look up some famous quotes from a person, they seem to echo the structure of the tree. So failure teaching you, right? Saturn dispositing Jupiter, learning. Also, what was his biography called? Dreams from My Father. Saturn and Jupiter both paternal, planets, but the idea that the father is Saturn, maybe we can say Jupiter and Aquarius is the dreams. Okay. And mixed trees. This is the last one. I'm going to stop in a second and ask if this is making any sense. Carl Jung, interestingly, has a very complicated setup here, if you follow me. So starting from the left here, he's got a mutual reception. So he's got dignified moon in Taurus and Venus in Cancer. They're swapping their signs. Then he has one of these single ruler planets, the sun in Leo ruling Uranus. And then he's got this kind of loner, dignified loner, Saturn in Aquarius. Now, the thing that's really interesting about this to me is that Jung is really famous for typology. So apparently, the story is more than 100 years ago, he was really close with Freud. They were best buddies. They were going to change the world together. And then they had this massive falling out, partially because he said, "I spend most of my evenings doing astrology." And Freud was like, "This is science. We can't do that. What are you talking about?" if you want to, you want to be laughed out of the academy. Um, and so he was apparently put this system together, which is really based a lot on elemental theory and temperament of these four basic, kind of drives or qualities in a person, which he broke into perceiving and judging. So the perceiving ones are, he called it sensing, which corresponds to earth. What actually exists? What am I dealing with here in reality? The other one would be intuition, which is related to fire. This is like your inspiration, your drive. Then the other ones are the judging functions, which are feeling, which is related to water, and thinking, which is related to air. He really ripped the page out of the book and took that. Now notice he has these these four planets at the top, dispositing his whole chart, and each one of them is in a different element. He's got all the elements covered. And we're going to see that there's actually more information we can get from that. Okay, so before I continue into this, I'm just wondering, I haven't been looking at the chat. Does anybody have any questions here? Let's see here. Laurel, I have a hard time a wheel chart. We're going to look at a wheel chart in a second. Um, Dispositor chart. We can try to do a synastry chart. I haven't actually done too much of that, but if we have time, I'll show you. I did this technique with the famous Malaysian airplane flight that disappeared tragically. There's a lot of weird stuff in that you looked at fixed stars, asteroids, elements, dignities. It's an interesting story. Anybody else have any questions? Please feel free to just unmute. I'm running the show, so I can't look at everything at the same time. If not, I'll just continue. Feel free to put it in the chat box. So here's a diagram showing Jung's four cognitive functions that I was mentioning here. You can see he was very influenced by alchemy and astrology. And maybe that was part of his makeup. Who knows? So I keep wanting to call this Carl Jung's dream house, sort of like Barbie, but it's not Carl Jung's dream house, it's Carl Jung's house dream. So he writes in his biography that he had this dream, and he was a very mystical guy. So in the dream, he starts out in an 18th century room, sort of a Rococo period. And uh, the name Rococo is from a French word, I can't say it right, rocaille, something like that, which means rock or broken shell. And it had a lot of marine or fish, ornamentation. It was a very like refined art style, very sophisticated. So he's got this Venus. We start out with Venus in Cancer, water sign. In the dream, he continues to go down level by level in his imaginary house. The next level he goes down to is the Renaissance. And the Renaissance, I'm looking at his tree and breaking it down, and it feels to me like this is where he's got the Jupiter in Libra, where there's a lot of ideas about expansion, rights. Art is huge in the Renaissance, right? There's also this kind of Plutonian power about land. That was the big thing in the Renaissance. And the Neptune, the influence of religion, say, upon the simple, the working class, the peasants, the Taurians. So he keeps on in this dream. Next level he goes down is to this Roman cellar. So he's going back in time every step that he goes down. And I'm taking that as the Mars in Sagittarius. The Romans clearly had a very martial background, and they're all about expansion and attacking and all that. And finally, he goes down, and at the bottom of this house, he's literally kind of going through the collective unconscious of humanity, is this prehistoric tomb. So this whole thing is a metaphor for the way that our minds, we inherit so much over the time. We're not always aware of where we're coming from or where our culture's coming from, but all of these energies are active over time. So doing that, doing his tree helped me to kind of imagine that or see, okay, how does this actually, in reality, he's talking about starting out with feeling here and then moving down. He's actually going down the whole feeling tree, starting with the Rococo, moving down to this next level with the Jupiter, Pluto, Neptune. I'm calling that Renaissance. Moving down another level, the Mars, Sagittarius, and then finally, I don't know, I put Scorpio. He has a Scorpio midheaven. I don't know if that really fits in, but the idea would be I had mentioned that planets at the top of the tree are maybe louder than others. And this seems to fit his dream pretty well because he's starting out more conscious, more in the present moment, and going back another 100 years, going back another 500 years, so to speak. Okay. And so you can see I've just annotated the chart with that thing that I was just explaining, the Rococo, the Renaissance, the Roman, the prehistoric. So Jung, in addition to being a world famous psychiatrist, he did a lot of these arts and crafts things on his own. He had a very wealthy wife, which gave him the ability to sort of sit around and do stone carvings and things like that. And so this is called the Bollingen Stone. He's a Swiss, and this has got a Greek inscription on it, and it's a little hard to see. And if you're not an astrologer, you might not pick this out immediately, but I've redrawn it on the right. He's literally drawn an astrology chart here. And it's actually very traditional in the way that it's oriented. So you've got well, let's go through it here. You've got Mercury in the middle, right? Mercury is always the one that's, it's supposed to have its joy in the first house. It loves boundaries, it loves trickery, it loves ambiguity. Um, it doesn't really, Mercury is not the kind of planet you can sort of just lock in a corner. It's kind of, Mercury is the traditional ruler of astrology itself. Um, if you look, there's some interesting breakdowns. First of all, you should notice the chart is broken into four different segments as well, which feels very much like we're looking at angles here as well. I tried to map based on the planets where they are in his chart and the signs that they're in, map his typology onto this. So he's got Saturn in Aquarius, calling that thinking. Maybe this is an image of how he saw the world or saw the human mind. He's got, the Sun and Jupiter over here, intuition, feeling. You've got the Moon and Venus, sensation and feeling. Mars is also in feeling. But guess what else is here? This is, I don't know how many decades before Project Hindsight. He's got day and night sect very neatly delineated here on this thing he's carving by himself, right? Interesting. And notice the day is mapping, in his chart at least, to thinking and intuition and feeling. That doesn't quite fit in the day model of things, but these are the day sect planets, the Sun, Jupiter, and Saturn. And look, he's got the night sect planets over here, the Moon, Venus, and Mars. And the night, the signs that they're in his chart are related to what he would call feeling or sensation and feeling, which are kind of nocturnal. On top of that, he's got the greater malefic on the top, opposed to the lesser malefic. He's got the greater benefic on the left, opposed to the lesser benefic, and he's got both lights, right? The sun rising at the ascendant, the moon, say, setting at the descendant. So I haven't heard anybody say that before. I just noticed that when I was doing this. And anyway, our man was definitely part of the tribe, even if he couldn't say much about it.
And I have to say, Alberto, Mercury in the middle, going in between.
Yeah, exactly. Mercury, like he's Mercury, you can't box him in. You can't tie him down. Exactly. So, and also Mercury traditionally he's the only planet that can be a night planet or day planet, depending on his location, right? So he's a trickster. He's a wild card. So now it's time for activity time, and I invite you, if you're interested, get a pen and a paper because you have to do this. You have to learn how to do this yourself. There's only so much I can show you. I've had to practice a lot. We're going to create a tree from a circle chart. And I'm not going to tell you who it is. This is going to be a mystery person unless you're really good at chart identification, which maybe I'm thinking Kai would probably be able to do this. Um, we're going to make a dispositor tree from this. Okay. Does that general activity make sense? We're going to look at a tree. We're going to try to find which planets, have domicile, which planets are in those signs and see how that org chart comes out. Does that make sense? Yes? No? Because now's the time to ask if you don't get this, because it's just going to get more confusing if you don't. Okay, so we're going to start. Are there any planets in domicile in this chart? So maybe it's better if we start with this chart, circle chart here. What planets are in domicile, if any, in this chart?
Saturn.
Very good. Yeah, we've got Saturn in Aquarius. So this is the way you would draw the chart. You would literally at the top of the paper, Saturn in Aquarius. Easy, right? Not too hard. Okay, so what's our next question? Does Saturn disposit any other planets? And I'm kind of giving you the answer here. I'm doing the best I can here, but basically, he's got the moon in Aquarius right next to Saturn. So that moon is being disposited by the Saturn. So I would draw a little arrow down to the moon. Okay. Are there any planets in mutual reception?
The Sun and Mars, yeah.
Yeah. I should have broken these slides up more, but you get the idea. It's funny because this is one technique that has a lot of depth to it. So it's like, what did they say? I forgot what the board game is, or maybe it's chess. Like you can learn how to play chess in 10 minutes, and then you could spend 80 years getting good at it. Like there's a lot of depth here. So I apologize if it's a little slow for you guys, but let me know. So yeah, we've got the Sun in Aries, exalted, and we got Mars in Leo. And I've drawn those next to the Saturn and the Moon we've already talked about. When there's a mutual reception, I draw this little double-headed arrow just to indicate that. Now, does Mars, I'm not even going to make this a question. Let's look at this together. Mars is dispositing Jupiter and Neptune, and its day sign, its night house as well. Okay. So what would we ask next? What I'm basically going to do, and hopefully you're getting this, is we're going to start from the highest level, and the highest level is domicile. And after that, if there's no other planets in domicile, the next order of operations is to say what planets might be in the signs of that planet in domicile. So we'll start with Jupiter. Does Jupiter disposit any planets? Venus in Taurus, right? Great, it's exalted. Does Venus disposit any planets? Yeah, Mercury is in Taurus. Okay, great. And does Mercury disposit any planets? Finally, we get to some of the outers here, Pluto and Uranus in Virgo. So this is kind of like you can see each of these trees has a different structure, a different shape. Can anybody tell me, based on what we already were talking about, what are the two types of tree structures that we see here in this example?
Ah, you're going so fast, Alberto, I can't tell.
Okay, well,
Is it the committee one?
no, committee is three or more.
Mutual reception and domicile.
Yes, yeah, very good. Yeah, I would call that single ruler. So it's just ruling, it's in domicile and it rules one other planet, disposits one planet. So this is Conan O'Brien, famous American comedian. So he's got mutual reception, a single ruler. So again, you can probably get most of this information just by looking at the circle chart, but you may not get all of it. So for instance, he's got the lights and the malefic. Malefics working together. So he's got the sun in mutual reception, right, with the out of sect malefic. Interesting. What's that dynamic? That seems like there's some tension there. And then he's got Saturn and the night sect light also working together, so to speak. Interesting. Um, Also, Mars is his malefic out of sect. Is the day chart, and Mars is the night malefic. And unfortunately, that disposits most of the planets in his chart. That's probably not the planet you would pick ahead of time to be running in charge of most of the other planets. This is like kind of like your inner enemy. And we're going to talk about Conan because he's got a really interesting mixture of like strong, powerful things and really depressing ass things. And if you know anything about his life, he's had some pretty big ups and downs. Also, his lights don't disposit any planets either. So they're kind of a little bit not empowered. However great this exalted sun is, it's literally not responsible for any other planets. And the moon is also kind of a cold moon, but it's not responsible. Yes, Laurel, what's your question?
Okay, so, but the thing about it, when you see Mars, right?
Mhm.
Mars being the motivation, with like the dispositor going down the tree, Mercury being the trickster and the comedian, that kind of ultimately, right, all the way down, the motivation is to expand, through his motivation with his artistic ability to be a comedian, right?
Yeah, definitely. That's part of it. There's other things. I'm gonna break down each of the different placements on each of the different branches and explain them. But for instance, like that Mars, what is he known for? He's known for offbeat, weird humor. So it's like this Pluto and Uranus, Mercury, right? But the Mercury at the same time, this is where comedy comes in. Mercury in Taurus is slow and plodding, right? Mercury in Taurus can be a bit conservative, speaking generally, and it's trying to hold the show together, and it's got these two crazy kids that it's trying to take care of. Pluto with the intensity and Uranus with the shock and the surprise. In Earth is maybe one of the more fixed conservative elements, right? So yeah, good comment. We're gonna go through each of these. So I mentioned elements, and again, you know, our software needs a lot of, there's a lot of potential for improving our software. But one thing you can't easily see in software are elements, and especially how the elements, what order the elements might be in any chart. So this guy, he's all about fire and air, right? On his high level. If we go with that and say this is his most loud personal level, it's on fire, and it's like, the Saturn in the air. It's like there's a kind of seriousness about it as well. The feeling is kind of lower down, and then we go to the earth, say the practicality, the pragmatism is all the way very low down, and it's got probably the three most rebellious, rule-breaking planets in Earth. So we got Mercury, who we already said you can't pin down, it's trickster, comedian, Uranus, the shock, Pluto, the intensity. So they're not in fire, they're not in water, they're in earth. So I think there's something about, and again, there's probably a bigger research project about comedians and what their charts look like, but there's something about like trying to hold things together and in the way that you think and speak, but having these like time bombs, in your hands. Yes, Laurel?
Or also monetizing all of it at the end, like grounding it through material success.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, if he didn't have all that Earth, I mean, he's apparently a very hard worker. He's had shows and TV shows and podcasts, and he's able to actualize all this stuff, right? So there's benefits to it as well. I mean, he's created a very unique path. So another thing you can do when you look at trees is just annotate when you make your little drawing. It doesn't have to be a fancy drawing like this. Which houses are all these in? And what do we learn off the bat? The three planets on its first level are all in the dark houses. They're all in the crappiest, traditionally the crappiest, most difficult houses. Interesting. So, like, what is it like when you have an exalted sun that's in a dark house? There's a lot of tension there. There's a lot of like wanting to shine, wanting to be appreciated and celebrated, say. So you can see he's a comedian, but there's some darkness here. There's some texture to this. So if we look at the essential dignity, he's got, again, an essential dignity is a questionable, doing this point system is a bit of a questionable exercise, but it can give us hopefully just a quick barometer of how much energy each planet has. He's got this incredibly strong sun, and Mars, and the malefics are very strong. Sun and Venus are the strongest, and then the malefics. But then look what's happening with Saturn and the Moon. Like, holy crap, that's like your big brother like punching you on the floor. Like that Saturn is just like that moon has nowhere to go, nowhere to escape, no other planets to deal with. Um, so Laurel, this is kind of what you were kind of getting at. So here's like my like line by line, quick ass delineations for these things. Fiery redhead TV host, okay? Mars and Leo. There you go. Um, Energetic and generous, right? He has just a lot of kind of generosity and energy. Aries, very impulsive. If you ever watched any of his skits, one of his things that he's really well known for is going into a restaurant, going into an office, and just improvising his way through the entire thing and making very weird situations happen. He's got this exalted Venus connecting through love and play, imagination, right? This is a screenshot from he went to Japan, and in Japan, you can hire a family of people to pretend that they're your family and then invite them, say, to your wedding or invite them to bring them to the office, and they will pretend that so he's in here saying, when I tell a joke, I would like it if you all really laughed and thought it was funny. So he's you can see there's humor there, but there's part of if you I have a real belief that there's part of him that's kind of broken. And there's part of him that really wants that connection but doesn't know how to get it. So like literally hires somebody to pretend that they're his family. So he was a persistent student. He went to Harvard. He's incredibly smart, but Mercury and Taurus. So this is a quote from him. Had to work. I was not good at math and science. I just forced myself to memorize textbooks if I needed to. Kind of surprising. This is the guy who wrote for The Simpsons. He can improvise just like that. But he's worked at his craft. He earned it over time. So Laurel, this is kind of what you were mentioning. I was powerful, unusual communicator. His off-the-wall sense of humor had never been seen in a late-night talk show host before. So we talked about the Mercury, looking for some stability, taking things slowly, and then having this impossible assignment of taking care of Pluto and Uranus. So a couple of his other quotes, there's nothing more liberating than having your worst fear realized. So liberation, Uranus, Pluto, maybe the worst fear. He also says there's good random and there's bad random. There's good silly and there's bad silly, and you've got to know the difference. And when I think about that, knowing the difference sounds very mercurial, right? And the Pluto and the Uranus are like these crazy scenarios, unexpected things, the intensity that he brings. And that Mercury in Taurus is like, okay, that's not funny. Boy, what if we changed a little bit? This could be funnier. And over here, you can see him as one of his characters, the crazy rooster. Just Uranus. Intense imagination, right? Neptune and Scorpio. And so when all else fails, there's always delusion. So this is also from the episode when he went to Japan. He's dressed up like sort of an anime character. This is a man in his 50s, like there's something intense and weird about him. Another thing you can look at is house rulership. So Saturn is Lord of the fifth and the sixth. So he likes to mix pleasure and work. So one other thing that he does a lot are these skits where you'd think, he's got a sound stage, he's got an audience, he can go out and do, segments in Japan. But what he really likes doing is going around to the people that work at the TV show and bothering them. So, he mixes work and fun. Fifth house and sixth house are kind of the same house. And this is a quote from an actual comedian. Eventually, all our graves go unattended. That's some heavy stuff from a comedian. And I think, and here's a picture of him. He's been in therapy. He talks about that publicly. He had a whole fiasco with the Tonight Show where he had it and then he didn't have it. So anyway, the Saturn moon, you get it. All right, so appendix here. These are some steps you can refer to as you try this out, and I would love to hear what your experiences are. Hopefully, I've piqued your interest a little bit in this technique. First question should always be, is there a planet in domicile? You should be aware of what domicile means, which I misspelled here. Does the planet dispose of any other planets? Okay. Are there any planets in mutual reception? Do those planets dispose other planets? And then do those planets dispose other planets? And then the trickier one, which we talked about, is there a loop of 3 or more planets disposing each other? Say Mars and Leo, is Jupiter's in Scorpio, so Mars is ruling that Jupiter. And then the Jupiter is ruling the sun in Sagittarius, so to speak. So I think we do have time. If you're interested, I think the first thing I would like to do is for somebody to propose a chart, and maybe we can work through together what the dispositor tree is. I'm happy to do that. If you can be any chart, can be your chart, or I just was doing the United States Sibley chart, which is quite interesting as well. I've done these for every American president, and there's only one president that has most of the planets in the chart in all of the history of the presidents ruled by the moon. Does anybody want to venture a guess at who that might be? Thomas Jefferson? Hmm? Anyway, Laurel, are you looking to answer this question or?
Oh, I was going to say you could totally pull up my chart and read me to filth, but now I'm stuck on what president had the moon stuff, and I'm trying to think.
What is the
There's
moon
been
like?
Jimmy.
What are keywords for the moon?
Well, I would think Jimmy Carter because he was such a sweetheart, but maybe not. I don't know. I mean, I have no idea.
Well, remember, in mundane, the moon, signifies the people, the common touch. Maybe you could even say demagogues. Anybody? Come on. The moon is unstable. The moon is always moving. The moon looks different every time you see. Sometimes you can see her, sometimes you can't see her. Okay, it's Donald Trump. So we've gone from the beginning of the Republic to the end of the Republic, and we've ended up with that. So before I get into that, I just want to just show you this slide, and I will show this after we do an example if you're interested. I use this technique, as I mentioned, for this Indonesian airplane, or I'm sorry, Malaysian airplane that disappeared. And you can just get a little peek at what that dispositor tree looks like. And it's literally seems to tell the story starting out from over on the top right here with Venus. And I have my reasons for each of the delineations here, but kind of going down to the point where you end up with the sun. You end up with, the travelers are Jupiter. They're the ruler of the ascendant. They're the victims. They're exalted. Everybody's looking for them. But then down here, we've got the sun in Pisces at the bottom of the chart, and Neptune, and the IC, and Chiron. Um, anyway, so I think I've just shown, hopefully your minds are not super confused, but I've shown you just the basic dispositor tree, the different structures there are using domicile. You could also do this with exaltations. I'm sure you could do it that way. I sometimes I use the ascendant and the MC. You can also use the part of fortune. I've shown you the elements as well. And in this Malaysian Airlines example, I also use aspects as well because you could very well have, say, the moon in Cancer, not managing any of the other planets, but having hard aspects to other planets. So there could be a little bit like Antisha or contra Antisha, that there's sort of secret relationships. So I encourage you to take this further. Laurel, did you still have a question or no? And
Well, I commented. I'm like, open up the rabbit hole and let's do Jonbenet. Come on, let's go there, guys. Anybody wanna? Anybody?
sure, unless there's I want to also just say thank you to Allison Price. She has a website, Starsology. This is the person that I learned this from. She has some good videos on this that have sort of a different angle on it. Um, Okay, so let's go into these. Let's go into a chart. Does anybody? I hear John Bonet. Does anybody want to raise John Bonet with a different chart? Going, gone.
So I'll raise you Jonbenet and give you freaking some kind of serial killer of some sort on top of that.
We're going dark already. I started with Conan O'Brien, and now we're killing people. All right, hold on a second. Let me open this chart up, and I'm gonna basically shut up because I want to see if any of this percolated for you guys. Can you guys see this chart here?
Excellent. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. All right. So who wants to make I mean, I can't do this. The first step is looking for a planet in domicile. So does anybody see a planet in domicile here? And I'm using traditional, but if you want to go crazy, we can use modern.
Mercury.
Good. Now, is that the only planet in domicile?
Sun and Leo.
Very good. Okay. So basically we've got two in domicile, we can see she's also got exalted Jupiter. Um, and
Saturn's also in domicile.
Saturn's in so he's got three in domicile. Very good. And if you wanted to use the modern, you could say Pluto and Scorpio also would be in domicile. There seems to be a scary thing about, like, I don't have any planets in domicile, and I was like so jealous of that. But then you look at somebody who does, like Jeffrey Dahmer, I think has four planets in domicile. It's like maybe domicile isn't the best thing in the world because it's sort of like I'm doing my thing. I can do it this way. I'm going to do them that way. And when you have, that's the whole thing. It's a bigger story, but like detriment and fall can actually be very good spurs to finding a balance or growing in different types of energy as opposed to just being like, yeah, you're right. You're totally right. Cut them up, So, okay, we started out with that. So I'm gonna start drawing it here just so I can follow along. So I would start by drawing the sun with the Leo glyphs. And then we also have Saturn in Capricorn and Mercury in Virgo. So, off the bat, there's a lot of essential dignity here in the chart, which is kind of cool. So, do we have any mutual receptions here? I'm guessing we probably don't, just because we've got so much, like, obviously, there's only so much mutual reception you can have if you have three planets in domicile already. But let's see here. Jupiter's in Cancer, Moon's in Aquarius. That's not Venus is in Cancer. Yeah, that's not going to work. No, I don't see any mutual receptions. Mars is in Taurus, Venus is in Cancer. Do you see why there's no mutual reception here? That there's just the domiciles? Okay.
Yep.
Okay. So the next step would be the sun. Does the sun disposit any other planets? Are there any other planets in Leo?
Can I ask, is it like if you have more than one planet in domicile, then you always go to the lights first?
More than one planet. That's just again. I invite you guys to. This is a small kind of a footnote technique that most people don't ever talk about. So I just created it this way. I would start with the bigger planets first. Basically, probably if there's a light, I would probably start by drawing that, but you don't have to. So Leo, any planets in Leo?
Nope.
Okay, great. So that's just kind of a loner. What about in Saturn signs? We already have Saturn in Cap, so I'm not going to draw Saturn again. What else is what else would be? And by the way, I would do this in zodiacal order. So the first one I would, and also degree order. So I would start by drawing Uranus in Cap. Then I would draw a little other line under Saturn, and I would draw Neptune in Cap. And then I would finally draw Moon in Aquarius. So if you're following along at home, you should have Saturn in Capricorn and three lines going below it, one going to Uranus in Cap, one going to Neptune in Cap, and one going to the Moon in Aquarius. Okay. Mercury.
And the moon collects everything. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So what about Mercury? Are there any planets in Virgo? Or we've got Mercury in Virgo, but anything in Gemini? No, but we do have the ascendant. So we might put that. I mean, again, I think this is a work in progress. And we can put the MC under Saturn as well, because she's got an Aquarius MC. Okay, great. Let's see. Now I also like to just count for myself as just count, because when you start drawing these squiggles, it's hard to follow. There should be 10 planets in there. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, I only have 6 planets. I'm missing a lot of planets here. So we didn't do anything with Mars. So Mars is in Taurus. Wait a minute, where's Venus?
Moon rules.
In Cancer.
Okay, the moon. There we go.
And Venus rules though, yeah.
So we're gonna go under the moon in Aquarius on my diagram, and we're gonna draw Venus in Cancer and Jupiter in Cancer. Okay, great. And then the Mars is gonna go under the Venus. I'll show you this diagram in a second. Well, now I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and Pluto is under Mars, all the way at the very bottom in Scorpio. Okay, let me see if this even comes out. Can anybody see this? Scribbles, chicken scratch?
Yep.
Does that follow from what I was saying? Does that kind of make sense?
Mm-hmm.
No, wait, where did you put your chicken scratch?
I'll show my chicken scratch too.
Oh, thanks, Kai. That's perfect. Yeah, there you go. That's better than mine.
Nice.
So
Better
So
than mine
what
too.
what are the elements that we have on that top level, Kai? What elements do we have on the top level?
Fire, earth, and earth.
Right. So interestingly, there's no water, there's no air operating at that top level. Also in terms of modality, what are the modalities we've got there?
Cardinal and mutable.
And fixed.
Fixed.
She's interestingly at the top level, and again, I can't tell you I know what all of these things exactly mean, but she's got limited, she's got a mixture of day and night elements, the fire and the earth, but then she has all the modes covered again. I hope you take this further and with your own charts. Um, so what planet is ruling most of the planets? Which is dispositing the most? If you
Daddy Saturn,
Saturn, Daddy Saturn, and what is the sect of this chart?
out of Sect Malefic.
Right, like Conan O'Brien, but maybe Saturn's a little more hardcore. One of Saturn's traditional things is of course death. Um, when you have this retrograde Saturn that's applying to Neptune, you might be talking about a mysterious death, a shocking death with Uranus there as well, right? In the eighth. Interesting. Okay. Side note, both of her parents have their moons in the eighth house. And I think, anyway, I don't remember exactly, but something kind of a little creepy about that. Um, okay. So that is her chart. She's got one planet that is a sort of it's like a loner, it's a single ruler, the sun, doesn't disposit anything. Saturn is like eating all of the food at the party. And then Mercury is not really, doing, Mercury is just ruling the ascendant. And her MC is also even ruled by Saturn. So what do we know about this poor little girl? We know that she died. And she died in a shocking and mysterious way. Uranus and Neptune and Saturn. Okay. So um, what else can we say about this?
We didn't know that. I
No,
just really.
we do. No, this is a very famous.
What? You just said we know it. I'm like, no.
No, we don't know. We don't know what happened, but we know that she
I
died in a
didn't know it
mysterious,
was a
shocking
dead
way.
person. Okay, so I'm looking at the age. It's pretty young. Okay, wow.
She
Can
also
we
has.
do the transit on the day that she died and see which depositor tree
Dis,
planet was affected at that time?
sure, dispositor. Yeah.
Or sorry, dispositor, sorry. Yeah.
We can do that. And does any? I want to just again. I want this is supposed to be more of a workshop, even though we're not in person. Does anybody there's a lot of interesting stuff to look at in this chart, frankly. This is kind of a scary chart. Does anybody else see anything or particular, are there any insights that you get from
Well,
this?
I do have an insight. It's not necessarily related to this specific topic, but it's interesting when you look at it, everything is domicile. As like I've seen a lot of horrible eighth house. I mean, one of the actually actress, she has that. Can't remember her name now. She just had her Saturn Pluto opposition. Jane Fonda. I mean, I can't say that horrible, but like I'm like, how did you survive? But I was thinking that Jupiter in Cancer is a very interesting thing, and because I've seen a lot of really tragic death on Jupiter Cancer, I can't put my finger point where the great protector, and I've seen on the clients and peoples, and that's a very interesting experiences. Um, I just wanted to add that along that, pretty much all these planets are doing fine.
Yeah, I mean,
Another one, though, Pluto, modern ruler of death, in the sign of Mars in the 12th.
uh, yeah, that's good. So there's sort of like, look at that Pluto Mars opposition, right? The 12th is, people will say this is your hidden enemies. The sixth and the seventh, but mainly the sixth are more considered open enemies. Um, that's that's sixth house is also like your everyday kind of stuff. This happened. Where was she actually found? She was found in the basement. Where is her son? It's right down there with the IC. It's all the way under the earth, right? Um, I think yeah, there's a couple of talks by Robert Hand that you can buy, which one of them I just love the concept. One of them is Jupiter as a malefic, and the other one is Saturn as a benefic. And I think, we can get very oversimplified about these things, but too much of something is also can be really bad for you. Um,
And the
yeah,
moon that rules the fourth, being in the ninth next to the midheaven, ruled by Saturn, which is on that eighth, ninth house cusp too, is another kind of indication of death, maybe.
yeah, it could be, or it could. I mean, there's a full moon kind of situation. I think she's born around an eclipse. I don't know. Kai would be the expert on this, but look at the father and the mother's relationship. What does this start to tell you about that? Like literally the father, her son is also with the South Node, which unfortunately is not being shown on this chart, but you know, Um, what was she known for publicly, but basically her body, right? Being on display, being a performer, all of that. The dance, she was a dancer, right? She was dancing. She's a model, so she's got Venus conjunct, whatever, an exalted Jupiter in the third. Interesting.
And Saturn in the ninth in this, right?
Mhm.
Like ruled, and Jupiter being the ruler of the ninth house in the third. So, I mean, her death ultimately was close to home in Venus Cancer, which is the ruled by the moon on the MC, where her sun is also in the fourth. It's just all of that.
Yeah. Well, I'm not going to use, I don't use the natural house, the delineations here. I would still say that Saturn is the ruler of the ninth here, but anyway, this is not dogmatic. This is a
It,
matter of
it looks like the luminaries get caught off between the Mars and Pluto.
yeah, they are. Look at it's a massive
Yeah,
grand
it
cross.
the 1515 Mars and that, yeah. It's both of the luminaries got as an opposite,
Mhm.
as a fix, which when you think about that moon um being ruled by the Saturn was in the eighth house of that, where moon dispose Jupiter and Venus, and then it goes back to that Venus disposing the Mars, and Mars is anyway, it's just
Yeah, yeah, yes, yes, yes.
interesting. It's like the moon kind of, yeah, lost the leg of the life there.
Yeah, and look at the Mars is also in detriment, right? And
Yeah,
and so it's that Mars is like going up against the king of the underworld with like one arm tied behind his back and a cold, like that there's a real power imbalance there.
yeah.
Um, so
And an
okay,
eclipse baby.
and what?
Yeah, you're right. Eclipse baby.
Yeah,
Yeah, the eclipse has to be just hours later.
yep,
Yeah.
Yeah, just 2 degrees of the moon.
yep, yep. So a sad short life, unfortunately. How do I want to, since there's more than a whole bunch of people here, do people want to look at the transits and see what the transits look like for a dispositor tree for her death or something else?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay. All right. Hang on a second. Let me get my,
Let's go dark.
let's go. Let's take it. Saturn has entered the chat. Let's,
How many of us have like eighth and 12th house placements in this group is what I really want to know.
we're gonna go dark. Yeah. Let me see if I can look into my big crime selection of charts here. Was she born 20? Hold on a second here. Bear with me. And by the way, this is a good time if anybody has any questions. Um, I hope this is landing. I'm not sure if it's totally landing because I can't really see too much what you guys are talking about or doing.
I do have a question at the end we can address.
Okay,
You
great.
just want her death date?
I got it here. Thanks.
Okay.
Okay, so Astro Gold. Let's fire this baby up here. Yeah, I have Saturn, Mars, and Venus in the 12th, so I like talking about death. Oh, hold on a second. I got a lot of trans-Neptunians here. I don't know if we want to go that far.
No,
Hold on a second.
it hurts my eyes.
Yeah, it gets a little bit too much. Okay. All right. So this is a technique I was thinking about today, actually, and I haven't really done this. I mean, I did the chart for the Malaysian crash, which is a transit chart, but I didn't look at a natal chart dispositor tree and a transit chart dispositor tree. So we're breaking some new ground, at least within my mind here. Who wants to walk me through? We've done this already once or twice. How would you start building a tree here for
I
this?
mean, look at that moon on the midheaven
Yeah.
right there.
Well, let's start with the domicile. What's in domicile?
The moon.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Anything else in domicile?
I don't think so.
Okay. Any mutual receptions? Saturn's in Mars's sign, but Mars is in
I don't
Mercury's sign.
know.
No, there's
I
this
don't
big
know.
chain of mess.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is going to be one. This is actually good for us to do. This is going to be, by the way, I don't know how I did this, but I added the asteroid chaos into into my astro gold, which is right near Algol in the eighth house, and also Sedna. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Sedna. Very, very interesting minor body that
Yeah.
think it is a 50,000 year orbit or something like that.
Yeah.
And the I think Inuit legend is that I think she was a princess that her father was like making moves on inappropriately. And then she refused him. He took her out in a boat, threw her off the boat into the Arctic, and she's holding on to the boat side of the boat with her hands, and he cut her fingers off. And she floated down under the water, and then apparently became sort of a underwater goddess or bringing bounty from the underworld. But anyway, what is that
Is,
about? It's about a daughter being betrayed and murdered by her father.
and is that Sedna glyph? Is that the eighth?
It's the one that looks sort of like Saturn.
Yeah. It's like Saturn. And then you've got ruled by Venus, conjunct Pluto in the second, by Jupiter in the fourth.
Yeah, and this is I use a lot of horror things around crime charts, and fourth is the end of the matter. Generally, if you end up seeing things down in the fourth, and we've got kind of a pile up, this is the busiest house in this chart.
Does that red mean retrograde or station?
Yeah, retrograde. I don't know if she has anything stationed here. Let me see. Hold on a second.
You know what would be interesting is like where was Mercury in her natal?
Well, one thing at a time. Let's finish doing this one here. So now I want you guys to walk me through this because this is the one. Domicile is pretty easy. I think mutual reception is pretty easy. The one that's going to break your mind a little bit is to try to find the committee. What's the secret committee that's running this sad chart? Can anybody walk me through this? And I'll give you a hint. I might start with the sun and say, okay, Saturn, draw a line from Saturn to the sun. So Saturn's dispositing the sun. Great. Now we look at Leo. Is there anything in Leo? No, there's no planets in Leo. So that technique just broke. I can't do that. I can't it won't work that way. And again, maybe if you do this for a while, you can get this going, but I couldn't do that. So let's start with a different planet here. Let's say, where is Saturn? Why can't I find Saturn? There's Saturn. So Mars is dispositing Saturn. Mercury is dispositing Mars. Mercury is disposited by Saturn. So follow me on this. I'm going to do it slow. We draw Saturn's glyph in Aries. Saturn is in charge of Mercury. So we draw Mercury's glyph in Capricorn. And Mercury is in charge of Mars in Virgo. And Mars in Virgo, it goes back. We do that little arrow. We loop back because the Mars in Virgo is in charge of the Saturn Aries. Let me just show.
That's the one I call chicken or egg, who's like.
Yeah, and also you should be aware, I just randomly picked that. You could easily rewrite this order so it starts with Mercury or it starts with Saturn. And I invite you to do that because there might be insights around that. There might be biases that I'm introducing by doing that. It's kind of like the longitudes on the Earth. Where do they start? We say Greenwich, if you use the geodetic system, but it's a sphere. There's no start to a sphere. It's just could start anywhere, can end anywhere. Okay, so we've got the committee. The committee is let's see, this is a night chart. So it's the malefic of sect Mars. It's Mercury, which is nocturnal because it's rising after the sun. And then we've got Saturn in fall in Aries, right? So that is the malefic out of sect. So basically, in terms of her chart, the moon is on its own. That has its domicile, but it's not great to see that that at this moment, both malefics are part of the committee along with Mercury. And what do we know from astrology? What does Mercury do when he goes to the party? When he goes to the party with the good straight A kids, he's a straight A kid. When he goes to the party with the bad teenager smoking cigarettes, he's a bad teenager. So we could kind of say Mercury probably has a malefic cast to him here. Okay.
And both of the benefics are ultimately disposited by that really upset Saturn.
Yep. So let's build it out a little bit more. So hopefully that makes sense. I'll just show it again here. This is the high level committee of this event, right? Which all of us, I'm pretty sure here lived through. That probably we're sleeping. What does Saturn disposit? Are there any planets in Cap or in Aquarius?
Uranus, if you count, but
Yeah, no, we would start with Capricorn though.
oh, okay.
So like look at what Saturn is directly in charge of. The Sun,
Everybody.
Ceres, Mercury, Jupiter, Vesta, right? Vesta, which has there's different authors that have given that the connotations around female sexuality. The Vestal virgins were meant to be young women who tended the eternal flame of Rome, and if they were found to have canoodled with some man, they would be buried alive. So the basement, right? So here we go. She also has Neptune and Uranus. So it's kind of like a full house down there. What about Mercury?
You can
Sorry.
also look at it too as like if you think about the sun being in Capricorn, if you're going around and you're thinking about it as like if we go around the chart and you start with the sun being in Capricorn, shining a light on Saturn, that is conjunct the South Node, which is about letting things go in the sixth house of illness. So there's something to that as well, where it's like, and it's and it's in, is it a square? Yeah. Anyway, but
Yep.
yeah, there's all of that, like Saturn that rules the Mercury and the Jupiter and the Vesta and the Neptune that also has to do with the Mars in the 12th. It's like there's something about being close to home, something violent illness, letting things go that is completely unheard in a very egregious Jupiter way. In a Neptunian otherworldly spirit, which rules Mars in the 12th of death. And it all kind of links together.
Yeah. Very good. We'll get into the houses in a second, but I mean, just look at this here. If you don't know this glyph, the circle with the arrow pointing down, like heavy on the ascendant there is Eris, the goddess of discord. Right? So this is the whole thing about I can't remember who, but they threw a golden apple in front of the three goddesses and it said to the fairest. This apple is for the prettiest of you. I think Aphrodite ended up getting it, but like,
There is through the apple, and
oh,
it said
Eris threw the apple. Okay.
Khaleesi on it, which
Yeah.
means the most beautiful.
Yeah. So we're talking about what? A young beauty queen, right? And then violence and discord around that. So we know that Saturn is basically running the show here. What about Mercury? Anything in Gemini? No. What about in Virgo? So we've got this kind of Mars in the 12th house of secret enemies, and the Mars that's being juiced up by the North Node. Okay, that's not good. Does Mars, are there anything in Aries? Oh yeah, there is. I'm just gonna, let's see, we already have the Saturn. So basically when you do this technique, you'll see I've already listed Saturn as one of the top level committee planets. So I'm not gonna list him again under Mars, even though he's disposited by Mars. Um, okay, so we've done that. So just to give you a quick shorthand here, we've got this fallen Saturn is in charge of, let's see, 5 planets in a night chart. It's the malefic outer sect. That's not great. It's canoodling with Mars and Mercury. There's a lot of tension going on here. Yeah, going back to you know, what Laurel was mentioning. We've got the South Node in the sixth house of illness and everyday occurrences. Interestingly, look at the Eris is right, pretty close to the Juno as well, in terms of perhaps that's something to do with the parents' relationship. We've got this very anoretic lot of fortune here in the mysterious sign of Pisces. That lot of fortune is just about to complete the entire zodiac. It only has another 44 minutes to go. Interesting. So maybe there's something about this is something that couldn't have been avoided, say. What else can I say about this? I mean, just look at the creepiness of the Pluto and Venus in the second house. This is something about this is the Persephone story again. This is about the underworld king abducting the young princess and pulling her under the world. So, and then yeah, I don't know, the moon at the top. She was a child, and I think if if you try to delineate from this, you could say, well, what would be the head story? What would be the headline that we're gonna, this happened, I think, almost 30 years ago. And it's young child full of promise and dignity. That's 10th house is the headline. And anyway, all of this bad stuff happened. So, okay, does that make sense? This is an example. This is how I would look at an event chart, and you can see it's pretty different than her natal tree. Does anybody want to see her natal chart in a biwheel with
Yes, please. I was going to say that.
Okay, because I'm sure there's even more that will come out here. So,
Another thing that's cool though is like when you bring Pluto into it, Pluto ruled by Jupiter conjunct Mercury in the fourth, where Pluto in what Sagittarius here, in kind of like a quincunx to what is that, Spica, that's in like relation to that kind of second house. So anyway, whatever. I was just seeing that Pluto to Jupiter to Mercury, and it's interesting.
okay.
And trine Saturn in the sixth, Pluto trine Saturn.
Okay, so let's go. Let's look at this chart here. Her natal chart is in the center. So what insights do we
Oh.
get around this? I don't have the software ability to show you. Again, it's probably hard to look at two dispositor trees side by side and compare them as easily as we would look at a biwheel. But what story are you seeing here in terms of this poor little girl? We also don't exactly know her time of death. I should mention that. This is the best guess based on the thing. But if you ever look into this case, it's like the most complicated puzzle you've ever heard in your life, combined with bad police work, lying, deception, destroyed evidence. So we'll never actually know, but this is the best possible guess. And obviously, many of the planets would be in a similar position, even if we shifted an hour. Anybody have any ideas about this one? Did we
That
learn
transit moon is right on the Saturn-Venus opposition.
Yeah, that's good. The moon, the body, right? Let's see. Yeah, yeah. What house is popping off for her? I apologize again because I have a lot of minor bodies in here. It might be a little bit harder to see. I mean, first off, the sun is in her eighth house. Mercury's in her eighth house. Her IC is in her eighth house. She was found in the basement. IC, the bottom.
It's
Ceres,
Mercury.
yep. Mercury. Ceres is there too, the mother, interestingly. Um, let's see here. The seventh house, I mean, this is, again, the seventh house, horror-wise, would be opponents, aggressors, enemies. Could that be the mother and the father? Again, I don't have the time to go into this, but there's a lot of theories about this to the point where they even have acronyms for the theories because there's so much conversation about each one that they have to. So it's like the father did it, the mother did it, the brother did it, the father and the mother did it, the mother and the brother did it. There's all these different possible, like, who done it kind of things. But there's something there about what's over there, but there's sort of like a woman, let's say, and some kind of powerful figure or death itself, being pretty angular there.
There's also that interesting theory that one astrologer put out about how it had to do with oh God, what's the guy's name? With the low Leaderjet and all of that. They were associated with him, and it was trafficking. And you look at the midheaven conjunct Venus here with the moon conjunct Chiron, right? In the event chart, and the moon being in Aquarius, ruled by Saturn, which we were looking at in the dispositor tree from the beginning. Like that's kind of interesting in another way, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. So yeah, one of the theories is that she did, again, it's totally screwed up. You shouldn't take your 2 and 3-year-old daughter and dress her up with lipstick and makeup and have men take photos of her, so she was kind of passed around a lot, and they think there might have been some secret cabal of child traffickers that might have been involved in this. Could be true, but like when I see her natally, like Venus Chiron, like her beauty is a wound, right? That beauty is dangerous for her. that's something that's going to stick out. And then it's a very complicated symbolic story, right? Because she's got the Jupiter there, but then the Jupiter, I take that back. The Jupiter is kind of far away from the South Node, but there's sort of increase and decrease at the same time. Maybe that's a little bit like she's going to have this rise, and then there's going to be this sudden fall.
And we look at it in dispositors, right? So we've got Saturn in Aries, which rules Mars in the event chart, which rules Mars. Wait, did we already do that from the beginning? It's like Mars, and then that rules Mercury, but then Mercury's conjunct her natal Saturn here,
Uh,
right?
Mercury.
Jupiter's conjunct her natal Saturn. So to the event chart, it's like Saturn rules Mars, which also rules her natal Saturn and Neptune and Uranus, which is kind of interesting because the IC conjunct Saturn, and then you've got Neptune and Uranus just on what, the third house side of that natally to the event, with Ceres, which is also about the mother, conjunct Saturn inside the IC or inside the fourth house part of that. I don't know, that's kind of fascinating. And the ascendant squaring it all at the same time.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, you could also, I mean, I think there's something about publishing here too. So if you look at that ninth house, it's pretty busy, right? So there's the shock factor of Uranus, there's the mystery of Neptune, there's the Vesta, which I already mentioned could be partially symbolizing her, but it could also be symbolizing the devotion and dedication. There are people who have spent decades researching this and trying to figure it out. Anyway,
She
Yeah,
was on Mars perfection, sixth house year, and then that
also,
Mars in the fourth in Virgo just sextile perfectly to Jupiter. Um, also,
mhm.
trying to all the Earth things. So
Yeah, yeah,
and also when you're talking about the publishing thing and you're talking about Jupiter and Vesta and Neptune and Uranus, well, in Uranus, right? Even when it comes to all of that being ruled by Saturn and the entertainment value
mhm,
of mass publishing this about this virgin, right? Vesta,
yeah,
the virgin sex object in a sense, right?
mhm,
For the sake that like was like this kind of like again media and film, which is Neptune and Jupiter for entertainment, right? But also in a religious kind of way with that Neptune thing and the righteousness behind whether or not it was okay to do these things with these young children and whether or not it's appropriate is kind of interesting as well.
mhm. Yeah, for sure. I think she's also has her Jupiter opposition, is starting to happen. It's starting to come within orb. Um, that's kind of interesting too. And Jupiter is her natal eighth house. Also, there's another technique Rob Hand has, which I like, which is I won't go into the technical name, but it means any like any houses, any signs that are ruled by the same planet have some kind of connection to each other. Meaning Jupiter, at least in Regiomontanus here, Jupiter is the lord of her natal seventh and eighth. So the quick delineation would be relationships and death are connected, right? So that's not great to see, either here. The Jupiter in terms of the death chart is in fall in Capricorn as well. Um, so anyway, I don't want to make this into just a crime thing. I could easily do
We
another.
could keep going, but like another thing that's cool is Venus ruling Chiron in the sixth, right? So you can also see that transit Chiron at 29 degrees, the pinnacle of Libra and
Mhm.
beauty, right?
Yes, that's
Rules
good.
for Venus that is actually conjunct Chiron, right?
Mhm.
So here it is. It's like the end of it and like the pain and the lesson and the death of it with the moon that rules Venus
That's
on the MC.
That's good. Yeah, there's a bunch of late degree stuff going on here. And generally, you're probably familiar, planets in late degrees are usually in the bounds of the malefic. So, the Mars is at 27, the Chiron is at 29, the
Heart of Fortune and Pisces at 29. Good grief. What
Neptune is
else?
26. I mean, there's also, interestingly, based on what you were saying, there's a T square between the murder Chiron, and Jupiter and Neptune. So that's, we could say, sixth house. That's a physical wound. It's a reckless last minute physical wound being opposed by great confusion, right? Jupiter opposing Neptune, the natal Jupiter opposing event Neptune. All right. All right. I think we've covered that. I hope that I seriously, please don't be shy. Do you have any questions about this technique so far? I don't want to go too off the thing. I want you guys to be able to be intrigued enough to try this and then not completely lost. As I said, I emailed you all the actual PDF that has a lot of this instruction. But does anybody have any questions about, just forgetting about Jonbenet for a second, about the dispositor tree?
I do have a question as far as like, I mean, I know that is this kind of different from like the point system, or is it like, like where do you, I mean, it like when you have multiple uh dispositors like in their domiciles,
Yeah.
right? Which one do you go to as the most important? Like which one is going to be the one that you're going to put on the first in the first line? Is it going to be, as in like how it presents itself in the wheel, as far as like which one you're going to call as most important, or is it that it's how much that one rules over, in a sense? Like which
I
one are you going to pay most attention to?
I would throw it back at you. I just kind of do it by intuition, but you could certainly put them in, well, it's a circle. So when there's a committee of three planets, so A is in charge of B, B is in charge of C, and C is in charge of A, there's no starting point and no ending point. So they're a unit. That's the whole thing. Like they're together. You can't really, there's no hierarchy there. There might be more power. One planet might be super powerful and disposing a very weak planet, but that, anyway. Yeah. I just draw 5 or 10 of these and then come back and let me know and I will try to, you'll see. It's something, some of it you just have to try. I'm gonna just do a little bit here on the Malaysian plane crash, just to give you another example of a transit of an event chart. So this was a very sad story. I don't know if you're familiar with this, but I guess it was probably like 14 years ago or something like that. This plane full of people mysteriously disappeared. I don't know, in the South China Sea. People thought it had been hijacked or had been bombed or had been, they didn't really know. They found some fragments multiple years later. No one's really sure what happened, but this is an image from they had a vigil for the victims. I want you to look at that plane. Does that plane remind you of anything? That the plane of candles here? Does that remind you perhaps of a glyph, of a sign glyph?
I mean, we're looking at Jupiter, right?
Not Jupiter,
Or not Jupiter.
Sagittarius.
Yeah, that's
Let's
what I meant.
look at the ascendant. This is when they lost contact with the plane. So this is the radical chart for the disappearance of the plane. Look what's on the ascendant. Interesting. So I'm going to give you guys some more food for thought, hopefully not overwhelming you. This is the dispositor tree for the takeoff chart. Or yeah, this is not the lost contact. This is the takeoff. So we can see what is this structure that we have at the top level? Can anybody tell me what this structure is?
So is this what you're talking about when you say not committee? No, it's not
Yeah,
committee.
no, it is. It's a
This is
committee.
committee? Okay.
So they have to work together. So Venus is in charge of Mars, Mars is in charge of Saturn, Saturn's in charge of Venus. So there's this idea of a conversation or a committee. Okay. You can see things are, just look at the way this looks. Like literally, um, one of the modern delineations for Aquarius, an air sign, is about air traffic controllers, aviation in general. Interesting. You kind of go through here and we can see it's a night chart and look like Jonbenet, which planet is ruling almost everything? Saturn again, the out of sec malefic. Or sorry, yeah, out of sec malefic. Um, let's go through these. So you were talking about a second ago, Laurel, about sort of like dignities. Again, it's a flawed system, but look at the dignity of the planets in this chart. Like that Mars is super screwed up, right? Saturn, Peregrine, Moon, Peregrine, Sun, Peregrine, right? Only Venus, well, I'm sorry, Jupiter has some dignity here, and Venus has a tiny bit of dignity, but and Mercury does too. But anyway, overall, in terms of running the top of the show, running this event, we've got both malefics in horrible condition. That's not great, a great start. Okay, let me walk you through this. I know this looks a little crazy, but there's a bunch of delineations that I've added here to try to use this as a frame to tell the story of what happened here. And this is another great mystery. So if we start over here, again, randomly starting with this laurel, there's no definitive way to start. This could start with Mars. This could start with Saturn. You could shuffle them around. I guess I started with Venus just because it only disposits the south node. It's simpler to look at. So,
I mean, I have to ask though, I mean, when you have going from right to left,
yeah.
you have Venus in one, Mars in two, and then you've got Saturn with all the rest. I mean, would you start simple with the smallest and then kind of keep building on that story, right? I mean, as far
That's
as maybe
That's
as
why I was doing it. And, honestly, I can't remember why I put Venus. I don't remember if there's a house designation, except that, well, anyway,
but as far as like a rule is like how you would start to read by this, oops, sorry, but how you would start to read by this technique,
mhm.
as far as like, okay, well, let's just start with the one that has just the smallest amount of dignities in the tree or whatever, right? Like maybe start there and then keep building as far as like how you would read on it as a rule.
I think so. I think
Okay.
so. You're welcome to try different ways. I was just using this as a framework that's quite different from like there's I think just psychologically, perceptually, when you look at this, you're going to see certain things and not see other things. When you look at it like this, all of a sudden it's giving you like a different angle. I mean, I'm delineating here Venus controlling the south node in Taurus as leaving the ground, as separating, getting away from the Earth, sort of. Um, this plane took off and it was going on its normal routine. And, the air traffic controllers were saying, hey, we have to pass you from Malaysian airspace to Chinese airspace or something like that. This is great. All right, have a good night. We're gonna go silent for a while. We're flying the plane for hours. You got that Mars in Libra. It's a kind of passive aggressive. It's a kind of if Libra is a communication relational sign, it's cutting that communication off. So this guy, the pilot, literally turned off the communication system for the whole plane, which is spooky and weird. Um, when you get down over here, that Mars is in detriment. You got the Saturn over here. You can look at the chart. I can share this with you guys, but basically, I delineated different parts. And part of this is based on William Lilly. So if you know about the zodiacal person, the idea is Aries is the head, Taurus is the throat, Gemini is the hands and the arms, Pisces is the feet. You go all the way down. Lilly did a lot of charts about ships that were missing, or when is it coming back, or was there a shipwreck? And he delineated, I have a diagram, I don't have it in this, but he delineated the parts of a ship, which you can also use for a car or an airplane based on signs. So I forgot to mention that. So I put Libra here as being the sides of the craft because Libra, according to Lilly, indicates the sides of a boat. Scorpio indicates the cabin of the boat, believe it or not. Uh, we have Saturn, signifier of death in a water sign. Ooh, that's not great. Um, and you can go down here. I won't go into the full thing here, but like I would say that the moon could be the co-pilot or also the attendants, the flight attendants taking care of the passengers. The passengers here are the ruler of the ascendant. They're the victims. They're exalted in a water sign of the ocean, Cancer. The moon is taking care. The moon's job is to take care of Jupiter, right? Um, and when we get down here, I already mentioned the ascendant being in Sagittarius, but like, look at all the water going on down here when you get to the bottom. There's a big mystery going on, but like the sun ends up in down at the bottom of the chart with Neptune, another water sign in a water sign, plus the IC, plus Chiron. So a lot going on here. This is an example that I was mentioning. This is super advanced dispositor tree. Draw the dispositor tree and then draw some of the aspects as well to see if that gives you, starts getting visually a little complicated, But let's take a look here. So if the pilot is Mercury in Aquarius, flying the plane, it's square to Saturn. So that could be being stuck on ideas, having trouble communicating, Saturn and Mercury, being fixated on one idea. Maybe they're not really sure if it was terrorism or if the pilot committed suicide with 300 people, basically. Um, and you can see down here, there's some other stuff going on. Here's an example of using house rulerships to try to delineate the same chart. So Venus, where I'm starting this tree up here, is ruling the 6th and the 11th, and the Venus is in the second house, which in Hellenistic astrology is the gate of Hades, the opening to the underworld. Um, Saturn, which is in charge of most of the chart, is the malefic out of sect in the 12th house, which could be a hidden enemy. So actually Demetra George did an interesting talk. She got obsessed with this crash as well. And she was able to look up asteroids. And there is a passenger list. And there were several Russian nationals that were on this flight. And she found a bunch of their name asteroids in, suspicious parts of the chart. It's interesting. Um, the Mercury is in the third house of communications. The moon, I already mentioned, is the flight attendants, is in the sixth house of service and or illness. Um, the uh, the MC of the chart is in Virgo. So this is like about problem solving. It's mutable. The story keeps changing. It's about the service. There was thousands of man hours of people searching for this flight. The Jupiter that rules the ascendant, the Lord of the ascendant, is in the eighth house of death. That's not really great to see. The Sun is at the end of the matter in the fourth house. Neptune is in the third house of communications. So the communications are broken. They're confused, not really sure what's going on. Anyway, I mentioned the Chiron already. And then if we want to go even further out into sort of crazy land, we can look at some of the fixed stars and some of the asteroids. So let's see here. I think with the Mars, Echo, the Greek character who was a handmaiden of Hera, who wouldn't shut up and kept talking and kept distracting the great goddess. She was cursed by Hera, so she could only repeat the words that were said to her. So there's something about this guy turning off all of the radio, stopping that two-way conversation, and just freezing it in time. Um, Mia Placidus is with the North Node. This is a fixed star, supposedly a lot of drama. These are, I don't have the delineation. I don't have the citations here, but I think this might be from Everton. I don't know. Bestows a lot of drama, tossed about on rough seas. The journey is more important than the destination. It's not easy to keep an even keel. The moon is with Aldebaran. Success doesn't last. Violent death. Let's see here. Mercury is with Castra, which is the belly of the sea goat, a disagreeable natured star. The prominence indicates malevolence and destructiveness and an uncontrollable temper. Okay, interesting. There's another star, Nashira, the nature of Saturn and Jupiter. Uh, and, I don't know, it's supposed to be fortunate, but that's also with the Mercury, not really fortunate. So when we get down to the lowest level, this is where it gets really spooky, but Antares, the ascendant is on Antares. Death from fires, machinery, weapons, or war. Sun is on Chernar. I don't know how to pronounce that. Fires and floods. Neptune is on Gong Gong, which is an asteroid, destructive Chinese water god with a human head and a serpent's body, usually blamed for cosmic catastrophes. Again, could you do this with a circle chart? Of course, but maybe it would. Do you see how I like experimenting with this idea that we have a little bit of a visual story that the tree gives you that the circle chart doesn't necessarily give you, that you can sort of start seeing things in a different way, maybe, find some new stuff.
I like the idea of doing this in conjunction with looking at a circle chart to kind of outline your reading in a sense. Do you know what I mean? Like this is a
Yeah,
good way to take your reading and write it down and out and do your outline for the reading. It's great.
thanks. Yeah. So, that's I mean, you can look at here. You could I could I don't know. We could have tried. Maybe we should next time. I'll start with just the circle chart and see if you guys can drag the. I mean, obviously you're not going to see asteroids here. You're not going to see the fixed stars unless you put them in or else you memorize them. But you should be able to see that, in this type of a horror-y reading of an accident chart, the ascendant ruler is the victim, and the descendant ruler planet is the perpetrator. So here, the ascendant ruler is, as I mentioned, an exalted Jupiter. This is the passengers in the plane in the eighth house. Who disposits that? The moon, in Gemini, travel and stuff in the sixth house of illness, say, or enemies. So anyway, hopefully I've introduced you guys to some stuff. I haven't seen anybody talk about this like this. I don't know if you have. Please let me know. I would love to know. I don't even think there's a book that covers any of this. But hopefully when you look at this chart, I want you to be able to think about this as well. And just, it's sort of like it's like turning that crystal around and seeing like, okay, wait a minute. We all have our habits, we all have our defaults and biases about what we're seeing and not seeing. But, you know, it might take you a while to pull out that, like, how fast would you be able to tell me that the planet that is ruling most of the planets in this chart is the outer sect malefic, right? You could do it, but it's not a one level thing. It's not just about Saturn rules Venus. It's about Saturn rules Venus, and Venus is also ruling, say, the South Node and all that other stuff. That's a bad example, but you know what I mean. The dispositor tree pulls you down. This one has 5 levels on a bat. And it's interesting in that it reminds me, literally, it starts up here, air, and water at the top level. We go down 5 levels, and we have, well, all of the main things are in water, plus the ascendant and fire. And you can imagine with a plane crashing into the ocean, there's going to be mainly water plus some fire. So, all right. I know I've just thrown way too much information at you. Does anybody have any questions, any reflections? Does this seem like something you would like to try to do on a chart? I mean, obviously the natural thing would be to, if you haven't done this already, do this with your natal chart. But if you're into, I don't know, I mean, elections perhaps, horror, I've never heard of anybody trying to do this with a horror, or even what we just were trying to do with Jonbenet and looking at the natal versus the transit tree. One thing I would love to see in software is, we have the current clock. Here's the clock of the chart at the moment. I would love to see a software that had a dispositor tree, because if you watched it over time, especially the moon, and the angles would start moving and reconfiguring themselves and moving to different branches and stuff. And that could be something that would help you delineate.
When you're talking about doing lectional charts, right? And you do this kind of depositor tree and you have these really slow moving planets, like Mike was talking about Eris, right? Or Sedna or Gong Gong. These are way, way, way outer planets. So if you're doing elections and you're using this technique for kind of forecasting, right? Where do you think you might go as far as looking at like the orb tightness for your delineations?
I mean, this is more, I I studied horary, and so one of the things you learn from horary is that in that tradition, the planets are the most important thing. And the planets' dignities or lack of dignities is the number one thing to start with, to the point where, aspects might be a close second, but say even fixed stars, let alone asteroids, they're just completely off the table. So just visually, I think even when I'm doing here and annotating, it starts getting very confusing. And I don't have the visual solution for how you might show orbs. I mean, even showing, I've put in here, like, okay, there's an applying square between Mercury and Saturn at 2 degrees. Okay, I'm a designer, so I'm always trying to find that balance where it's insightful, but it's not like blowing your mind with too much information. That's why, for instance, I'm showing you, here's the basic structure of the tree. Here's the dignities of the tree. Here's my, based on the zodiacal man sort of layout kind of thing. Here's showing aspects. Here's showing house rulerships. Here's showing fixed stars and asteroids. So I've got like half a dozen trees because I can't show all this information without losing my mind on just one. So there's no reason why you can't do the same thing if you find this useful. You could start by drawing the basic thing, and then depending on your expertise and your interest level, every one of us has different hobby horses and different things we are afraid of or not aware of. Maybe you don't care about the essential dignities, but maybe you care about the symbolism. Again, you'd have to look at this diagram that I have about the body. But like literally, at the end of this chart, we're looking at everything's mutable at the bottom of this tree here. And, four of the five things are in the last sign of the zodiac. So there's a kind of completion, there's an end that's happening there. So again, like I said, I'm not, we're in some new ground here. This is some new territory. This is not a commonly used thing as far as I can tell. I've only really heard one other astrologer ever talk about it. There's on astro.com, if you're curious, there's a janky kind of like 1985 style software where you can actually, it's a hidden menu. You can find a way to do this with a tree that you have in astro.com. It doesn't look as good as this. It's a little janky. It's a little hard to read. But if you wanted to do that, I think it's easier to just pull out a pen and just start drawing it yourself. I think you shouldn't probably use software for this. Um,
That that janky 1985 software is Astro.com's version of Astrolog. Astrolog has dispositor trees by sign and by house and has them built in since version 1.2.
oh, that's
So
very good to know. Yeah. So, yeah, Kai has shown me Astrolog. I believe it's is it sort of open source or there's something where you can,
it's free software. Walter Pullen wrote it.
yeah.
So it's freely distributed. Astrolog.org. But
And you can kind of roll your own with that, right? You can
yep.
make it do things like create your own custom. Yeah. Um, but you know, anyway, that's the content I have for tonight. Thank you for coming. I'll ask one more time. Does anybody have any questions? Because otherwise, I'm going to assume that this made complete sense and that we went through a very nuanced and janky kind of technique here with multiple different variations, and it all made sense. Is that true? You got it?
I do have something that it's not necessarily, I don't know if it's a question, but maybe we can all brainstorm for a second. So I was thinking this committee, I was thinking like maybe some ways within this committee,
Mhm.
symbolic time techniques, either um progression, fiduria, obviously perfection and circumambulation. In some ways, I was thinking one of them actually, when it's like louder than the other one, just get more, by
Oh,
perfection to, just thinking of like maybe they're within their relationship, obviously they don't, by transit, they might change dignity, right? By their transit to the natal, but besides the transit, any other symbolic time technique would make one of the other more louder rather than them being circling each other. Maybe one of them has more weight. I just don't know. I just was thinking about if it ever, I wonder if it happens. Anybody has any idea about that?
that's that's lovely. No, that's exactly what I wanted to hear. I mean, I don't know, but for instance, there's no reason why you couldn't look at the perfection lord and like see, I mean, you might already know from looking at just the circular chart, okay, this perfection lord is about to lose a lot of dignity right now. And that's interesting. Well, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Uh So, or like solar return, you could probably think about Ferdaria. You might think about zodiacal releasing. Again, this is all completely greenfield territory. And I don't know, the way that I work is that if I hear something that catches my imagination, I want to play with it. I've probably drawn 100 of these charts by hand, so now I know how to do it pretty quickly. I can even do some of them just by looking at them. That takes a little bit of practice, but like the sky's the limit, right? We talked about like think about all in astrology, there's so many symbolic relationships. We're always looking at symbolic relationships. So, how is this planet relating to the sign that it's in? How is it relating by aspect? How is it relating by speed, by sect, by element, by mode, by a conjunction with an asteroid, fixed star? Like, again, you got to I have a lot of Gemini, so I want to just do 15 versions of everything. But you should start if there's something that you're interested in, like there's no reason why that couldn't add another layer. So I wanted actually I'll just do one quick one here since this is I think an important mundane, right? How does this work in mundane? So here's the Sibley chart. Before we do something on this, can anybody tell me, do you have an instinct? What does the United States feel like structurally? Does it feel like there's one planet that's ruling this? Again, there's a lot of argument about which is the founding chart of the United States. This is just one of them that's used pretty frequently. But do you think that it's a one planet kind of situation? Do you think that it's a mutual reception situation? Do you think that it's a committee? If you had to guess before looking at this, and I know some of you are pretty sharp, so you probably figured this out already, but what do you think? Do you think what one before you even look at it, what vibe does the United States give you?
Cancer.
Cancer. Yeah, it's cancer. It's a
Okay,
cancer.
so wait a minute.
But what
Yeah,
I
about the
believe our
definitely
high school
stellium.
government class, it's a
There,
committee.
there
thank
is
you.
a Venus, yeah.
What do we
There's
what do,
Venus, Saturn. There's a cycle going on there.
how did this wasn't started, well, it was started by a king, but the United States wasn't started by a king. It was started by a Congress, which is a committee of guys sitting around landowners arguing about stuff. So you're right. It's just, if you wanted to do some extra homework, United States has Venus in Cancer, and exalted
Wow.
Saturn and the moon in Aquarius. That's the committee at the top. So there's two cardinal and one fixed. Interestingly, there's no mutability at that top level. And also it's heavy on the air. It's two parts air, one part water. And then if you go down from that, which planet in the Sibley chart, and we can do this if you have the time to do one more, which planet do you think controls most planets in the Sibley chart?
Ooh, I need to take a minute for that. But
Well, the moon, no?
Moon.
Yeah.
Very good. Thank
I
you.
mean,
The
yeah, the
moon.
moon, but I mean, I just think of the stellium. I just see that, and I think, yeah, it's a stellium in Cancer, which is ruled by the moon, so that would be therefore, okay, yeah, the moon
Yeah.
starting well.
So that's a
Got it.
good shortcut. Like stellium is definitely a shortcut to being like, okay, who's the big kahuna here?
I mean, yeah.
But yeah, the moon is dispositing Jupiter, the sun, Mercury, the ascendant, Uranus, Mars, and Neptune. And if you remember what I was saying, Donald Trump, as horrible as he is, his chart is quite keyed into the American chart in different ways. But one of the ways that we might say is, why did this incredibly incompetent, evil person become president? He has a very similar dispositor tree, at least in the regard that both the country and him are moon driven. So, we could talk about more other things like mom, home, and apple pie. Mom, the moon, home, Cancer, apple pie, Cancer, right? Like also in the eighth house, the other people's money and things like that. So anyway, interestingly enough, the United States, the Sibley chart doesn't have anything in domicile. So that's kind of interesting because you'd think, a country, but then again, there's a country that's supposed to be based on democracy. And again, if we break open the meaning of that word, that means people power. And in mundane, people are symbolized by the moon. So it some actually is the structure seems appropriate. So anyway, that's just a drive-by shooting of of the Sibley chart. I'm going quickly on that, but I think it's a different way of looking at charts. I hope that you find some value in this. And if who knows what you could possibly find here, there might be interesting stuff secondary progressions.
I would love to see, like, is Nestle, when you were talking about that, like doing the secondary progressions, the solar returns, all of that kind of stuff, and seeing as far as like how the dispositor tree, when you like just what we did with synastry, right? I mean, it's the same thing with your progressions and so on and so forth, and you
Yeah.
just keep going down those rabbit holes. But that would be kind of amazing. I like it.
Yeah, synastry would be probably my natural next step, and I haven't actually done that, but like I don't know, like imagine if you have one partner that is kind of like a Beyoncé, where there's one planet in charge of everything. And then the other person is like Beyonce and John Lennon off just looking at the trees, you're like, this is never going to work out. Like, this is going to be, or whatever. McCartney and Lennon had a very tight, but also very problematic relationship. One of them is totally sober, a little bit cheesy, and on top hardworking. And the other one is like, really inconsistent, violent at times, like emotionally disturbed. So anywho, that is your whistle stop tour through dispositor trees. Feel free to contact me if you
Thank
make any
you. This was
discoveries.
awesome.
Thanks, Alberto.
Yeah,
I finally
thank
got
you.
it.
Thanks. I'm glad.
Thank
I like
you.
the one piece of advice I give you is just sit down with a piece of paper and practice, and it'll make much more sense to you. And I hope that you have your own inspirations to say, "Oh my God, there's something here that I could try." Like the nodes. Where do the nodes move? What does it mean if a node at your birth is at one part of a tree and then is at a different part of the tree? Whatever. What happens if you use the modern rulerships instead? The way that I do it, all of the outer planets are automatically at the bottom, which is probably not fair, right? That's the way I do it, but maybe I'm missing stuff.
Well, I think it would be great again for SFOAS if we just did like a weekly study group. I mean, if we could do this as like a study group and every, I don't know, like what our timeline is that, all right, we're going to do 3 charts and maybe we'll take a vote. And then we've got study group and we're going to do 3 charts with dispositor charts with 3 or 4 different types of progressions or transits or synastry to those charts and really kind of lock it in. I mean, that's how I learn with others. I could do it alone, but I can't. I won't. I won't. I gotta be here with you guys.
Well, sure. Maybe if you're interested, we could do that. I mean, I know when I go to NORWAC is coming up next month, and whenever I go to NORWAC, if you go to a lecture, someone's talking about a chart, and there's always one smarty pants in the back that's like, "Oh my God, the lot of fortune is blah blah," that nobody else saw. Nobody else could see that in the moment, and you're like, "Damn, I wish I had seen that." I'm just thinking, if you have this in your back pocket as a technique and you're just doodling or you're like looking at the chart, you might see something that nobody else sees that tells part of the story.
And that's why I like study groups, right? So, like, because the more input we get, then the better we are at seeing these things,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Yeah, we all help each other get faster.
yeah. Ultimately, I hope we end up with better software that gives you multimodal, views of things instead of just this canonical monolith of the circle chart. Because again, it's data. It's basically data, and every visualization is missing things, and every visualization shows things, right? And I think it's very helpful to just flip it around and look at it from different angles. Sweet. Well, all right. That's all I've got for tonight. Thank you for coming. I hope you guys find some value in this and let me know if you have any questions or any discoveries with this. I think it's pretty open field and you might find something super cool that again, yeah, hopefully you can see a circle chart is amazing. Fantastic. It's not everything though. It's not going to show you everything.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks guys for coming. All right. I've kept
You
you
guys
for
at
a
NORWAC.
while. See you guys at NORWAC, hopefully, virtually or in person. And have a good evening. See ya.
Bye.
Bye bye.